I'm going to tell you a story. One of redemption. One of finally having an opportunity that has been earned and making the most of it. One that you already know how it ends. But do you really? This is Pass Fail, the Kyle Shanahan story. Kyle Shanahan, with help of general manager John Lynch, could completely control the personnel decisions and could finally actually have a lot of control in his quest for finding the perfect offense. In the past, he kind of had to just deal with whatever the team could get. Now he actually had some control. He would go out and sign someone like Kyle Juszczyk, who was a great fullback, and they got him from Baltimore. Now to have a great fullback who can really fit that offense, which likes to use fullbacks a lot. He drafted George Kittle. Really, he went in a little bit of a later round because not the best pass catcher in college, but really good blocker, and that's obviously very important in this system. He would also get someone like Pierre Garçon, who he has worked with in the past, and even went out and got Brian Hoyer, someone who he knows can at least win some football games, even if he's not a superstar necessarily. So they were definitely making some moves, and with their first two draft picks, they even drafted two defensive players because, his mindset is kind of, listen, I'm the offensive guy. I want to make this perfect offense, but also let's build up our defense so we can have some success there. He can finally sort of get the gears in motion and really get his team to be the way that he wants them to be. Hoyer definitely could make some plays. I mean, we've seen it in the past in Cleveland. He was far from an atrocious player and can at least really keep a team afloat for the most part. Like a play like this, it's going to be a cover one blitz, and he has George Kittle running over the middle. So this is already a pretty good situation. It's a route that on paper tends to work pretty well. And what you're going to see is just that Kittle kind of does what we're going to see him do a lot more in the future. He gets open very easily, and Hoyer makes a pretty accurate throw. Again, low degree of difficulty, but he made it pretty well, and Kittle was able to make that catch. And that's really what they need out of a quarterback. If you can't get a great quarterback, at least get the ones who can make those, low degree of difficulty plays work pretty well. I mean, he fits the system and he's been in it before. Like a play like this, for example, what's going to happen is that it's play action. He has a receiver run over the middle. So, Kyle Shanahan's special. And what's going to happen is that, he does a pretty good job. His receiver gets wide open again, but he's able to make the throw. It's not a high degree of difficulty play, but not every play is going to be a high degree of difficulty play. In fact, most aren't. So you want a quarterback who can just make those sort of routine plays. Again, as we've seen in the past, there's a lot more to it than that in football, but he can make some plays, and he can also throw the ball downfield, which is, that's how they're able to steal some wins with Cleveland and turn into a halfway decent team, despite the fact that the roster was not that decent. Like on this play, it's a cover 4 zone, and that's going to be the route that really don't want to throw to here. So, pretty good. Does get into a gap in coverage, but is deep down the field, and it's a tough angle to make the throw. So there's some pros, there's some cons for sure. And you're going to watch, again, but you're going to see Hoyer takes a step back, and he is able to make a pretty accurate throw deep down the field. So, again, he can occasionally make some very good throws. And you watch his highlights, and you'd actually probably think that he's a really good player, actually. His highlights are definitely pretty promising, for sure. I'll show one more example where this is, again, going to be a pretty similar idea. This time it's cover 3 zone instead of cover 4 zone, so it's a bit of a better situation than the last one is, but still similar idea, and he's going to have a receiver run around, then cut back in. So, again, he's coming back in a little bit, so that also makes it a little bit easier, but watch what happens here. Because of the situation, his receiver is, it's a good route on paper, so he is going to get open. And again, just a very good throw deep down the field. They're able to get those chunk plays and be able to move the ball downfield. Again, despite the fact that they don't necessarily have the most talented team. In fact, they have a very untalented team by far, I think. So, he's able to make those types of plays, and that's definitely key. So, that's certainly good. But, of course, with Hoyer, there's really just as much bad as there is good. He's Hoyer the Destroyer. That sometimes is a good thing. That sometimes is a bad thing. Sometimes he's destroying your own team. And, this is an example of the bad. It's a cover 3 zone, and, that's the play. Hoyer fakes the handoff to the top of the screen. He then runs down towards the bottom of the screen. There's multiple players he could throw to. One is just flashing over the bottom of the screen. He also has another player running over the middle. So, it's basically just take your pick, but really you want to just obviously, throw it to the deeper guy if that's available. And as you see, once the ball is snapped, the player who is deeper is going to be available. That there's a window where you can make this throw. Not a wide open window, but, it's pretty close, actually. I mean, you stop and make the throw right now, you can easily make this work, whereas instead, Hoyer is going to just throw it to the more shallow route, which they aren't even able to gain any yards. And, that was a third down. They just needed a first down, so that was probably partially why he was like, hey, we only need a few yards. Let me just throw it short and get the few yards. But the problem was there was a much better chance of you being able to throw it downfield and having success that way than getting the first down throwing it short because they weren't able to get the first down. And if you threw it deep, that would have been a guaranteed first down pretty much. So, it's just some of those decision-making things. He isn't as smart of a quarterback as Shanahan has had with some of these other guys. He's kind of one of those guys who, Shanahan does have to do a little bit more work with, and he kind of, that's part of why he's had to, with Hoyer, sort of rely on these chunk plays to some degree, because Hoyer will just make mistakes sometimes. Like this one's another great example. It's, a pretty typical play action, it's his own coverage, have a receiver running over the middle. Again, typical Kyle Shanahan play. But again, one slight difference is that it's a lot shallower of a route than typically Shanahan will do. Usually Shanahan likes to have those routes really cut just right in front of the safety who's deep if it's a cover 3, because there's only one safety deep in a cover 3, whereas cover 2, there's obviously 2 safeties who are deep, and then the 2 player covering deep are the cornerbacks. But anyways, what you see him do right here is that he's going to drop back, but Kuechly steps in front of the route, and Hoyer just doesn't notice it and throws it right into his chest. Just, again, a good awareness play by Luke Kuechly, which is something that he would constantly do a lot back when he was in the league. Kind of crazy that he's not in the league now. He retired early. But, that's just the kind of thing where it's like he's clearly not going to get open right there, but he's just sort of sticking to the script because that's what he has to do. He's not a smart enough player to where he can improvise and he can be the chess master out there. He kind of just has to rely on his offensive coordinator, and sometimes the play that works on paper isn't going to work out in practice because a defensive player is going to realize something. And so then it's the quarterback's job to realize that and do something else, but that time he just didn't realize it, which turned what could have been a good play into an interception. So, even if it couldn't have been a good play, an interception is the worst play, so you can't be making that kind of mistake. This play is another interesting example where it's going to be a cover 3 zone, and he has a player who's going to be running into a gap in coverage, so that's where Hoyer wants to throw this ball to. The problem with this is that, Carolina's going to do a pretty good job of generating some pressure right here, so for Hoyer, he's going to have pressure pretty immediately, but there still is a player who can't get open. And, this is the kind of thing where it's like sometimes in the Shanahan system, you need the offensive line to hold for a second, and you need a quarterback who can throw while under pressure. You need that to happen. However, what's going to happen here instead is that Hoyer just isn't able to throw under pressure. And this is also part of the thing where it's like, since he wants to have these deep routes, he wants to get these chunk plays because he doesn't trust this offense to methodically move down the field. Well, now when he has somebody who, maybe isn't the best at throwing while getting hit, and just in general, the offensive line isn't going to be able to hold for 5 seconds every play. So some of these deeper plays just aren't going to work out as well, and that was an example of it. It certainly wasn't always his fault. I mean, the receiving talent around him was definitely not great. Like a play like this, that's the receiver he wants to hit. Running over the middle, it's man coverage, definitely a pretty good route in this situation. And for Hoyer, what he's going to do is just going to step back and try to make this throw. Makes a ton of sense, right? But after the ball is snapped, you just notice that receiver he never gets open really at all throughout this play. And, he's going to argue that there should have been a penalty there. And maybe there should have been, but even after that potential hold, he really made no effort to try and get open after that and try and catch the ball, which maybe he should have tried to do, even if he wasn't able to get it. And also for Hoyer, he's just throwing it in that direction, hoping to generate a flag instead of doing what you probably should do and just play things out as though it's not going to get a flag. So, definitely some mistakes. That one probably a little bit not as big of a mistake as the other ones I've been bringing up. But I'll bring up one more. This is, again, in this game. This game was actually it was a Thursday night game. It's one of the better Thursday night games ever. just in terms of like entertainment value. It was very high scoring. So, this one was definitely Hoyer's best game, but it was zone coverage. He just wants to throw a quick slant route, not slant route, a quick out route to the side of the screen. And really, I mean, this is usually a pretty low-risk play, but Hoyer's going to do two problems right here. One is he's going to make this throw when an LA player clearly is looking in that direction and ready to make a play on it. And the second is going to be the throw just doesn't have any zip on it, and it leads to a pick six, which is just not a good, almost a pick six. Okay, it was tackled right before the pick six, but pretty close. And it also just was a very, very poor decision, very poor throw. And it sort of, as more and more time went on, it became more and more clear that Hoyer is what he is. He's a guy who can win you some games, good backup, not necessarily a good starting quarterback. And so for Shanahan, he was going to have to figure something else out. Heading into their sixth game of the season against the Washington Redskins, they were 0-5. And after a bad start, Shanahan finally said, you know what, we're clearly not going to be able to do anything with Brian Hoyer. It's time to see what else we got. Let's see what CJ Beathard can do. They selected Beathard with a late third-round pick, and so there kind of are some parallels between this and a Johnny Manziel situation. The biggest difference being that Beathard was much better than Manziel because it's impossible to be worse than Manziel, and also just the fact that they were trying to make the playoffs, although it was a bit of a long shot, whereas here, 0-5, I mean, it's not going to happen at this point. You're just building for the future here, and so if you are building for the future and there's not as big of a gap as there was with Cleveland, you might as well try something out here. And while Beathard wasn't a total waste, he certainly wasn't great either and would definitely have his flaws. Like, on a play like this, for example, I mean, this is kind of a good example where, Shanahan is saying we don't have the best quarterback talent. Let's just see if we can get some chunk plays. Let's have a receiver run deep. It's going to be a cover one blitz. And, this is really what they need someone to do. If you're not going to be the most talented player, you can still win games just by being able to throw the ball deep and getting some chunk plays because you can get points that way. And a lot of these aren't that high risk because even if they do get intercepted, it's further down in the field. And also, it's just not a huge chance of getting intercepted. Really, over the middle plays have the biggest chance of getting intercepted, although with Shanahan, he makes it a lot smaller with the windows he creates. So Beathard does take a drop back. The pocket is clean, and he makes a throw, and there is a window, but he isn't able to make that throw. I mean, it's not like he's missing wide open guys, but he's not the answer, essentially. He's not going to make these great plays, which is certainly a problem. This is another example. It's going to be a cover one hole right now, or he has a receiver running deep. That's where he wants to hit. This is the route that just works against this type of coverage because obviously there's no one in the middle of the field. He has someone that can definitely make a play, so that's where he wants to throw this ball to. It makes a ton of sense. However, once he takes the snap, this throw is going to be nowhere close. You could argue it's because of the contact, but I don't think that's really true. I think that the reality is that he just didn't make a very good throw. Maybe it would have been a little bit closer if there wasn't contact, but at the end of the day, when the player who's trying to catch the ball doesn't even really try once he sees how far over his head it is, that really just kind of goes to show not the best throw from him. He wasn't the most accurate passer. The reality is that's just what it came down to. And he also was clearly a rookie out there too. I think that was another big problem was like a play like this. It's going to be sort of a buzz concept where it's man coverage, but you have two players on the field, but they're kind of, they're not staying deep obviously because it's an end zone situation. So you don't really care if you get 1 yard into the end zone or 7 yards into the end zone. It's still 6 points either way. But this is the concept. He has a receiver who's running towards the back of the end zone, so he could potentially get open. But what you're going to see here from Beathard is really that he times this one at the absolute worst timing, where you either want to throw it immediately or not throw it at all. He then gets hit as he's throwing it and loses the football. Again, it's kind of the pocket presence of the NFL moves very quickly. A lot of rookies struggle with pocket presence and won't notice when there's pressure coming from a certain side, especially when, you typically do a pretty good job of creating pressure, not having pressure from a certain side. Then when there's more pressure, that can surprise you even more so. And he could have made this throw earlier too, but he just waited a bit too long. Not a lot earlier, but there was definitely a way it could have been timed a little bit better. And also, you never want to be throwing the ball as you're getting hit. So again, that's a tough play. I'm not going to get on him for that. But pretty much every tough play he had to make, he didn't, which is, again, he's a rookie, so that's part of it. But also, he's just not a super talented player, which is another part of it, which is fine. he also is a backup. He's not an NFL starter, which, again, there's nothing too terrible about that, about having a couple of good quality backups, but there is when you don't have a quality starter. This is one more play where it's going to be play action, and he has two players running deep. So, this is the kind of thing. This is basically what Shanahan has to do to get the ball down the field, is he has to hope that he has players who can get open deep. And I think one of the real problems with this idea, the reason why this can maybe work in select situations but will never win a Super Bowl with a system like this, is simply because it's so difficult to pull something like this off. I mean, your offensive line has to hold, and you have to have receivers who can get open down the field consistently. And, San Francisco, they just didn't really, especially not the way that, even a Cleveland Browns team could. Because at least with Cleveland, they did have Josh Gordon there for a little bit of it, whereas, for this team, I mean, Kittle was great, but he hadn't really came into his own this season yet. So, watch. Neither of these receivers are really able to get open, they're certainly not open quickly, and they can't even really get to the end of their route because the pressure comes quickly enough that, it's not even terrible offensive line blocking, but those are just tough plays to pull off. You're relying on a high degree of difficulty plays to pull off to win this, win a game or even just get the ball downfield. That's difficult to do, and that's a huge reason why I think at a certain point Shanahan said, okay, you know what? We're not going to get anything done if we don't have better quarterback play. There's other problems with our team. We are not a perfect roster at this point, but the reality is we need a quarterback, and we need a quarterback badly. And now typically that's a difficult thing to pull off, right? In the middle of the season, that's not so easy to do. They did finally win a game, but eventually just, kept losing and kept losing. They went down to 1-11. They needed a quarterback, but it's usually you can't get a quarterback mid-season. However, this season was a little bit different. There happened to be a quarterback who was on the trade block. A quarterback who I think many people figured was somebody that could potentially be starting the next year, but all of a sudden Tom Brady just continued to be successful even at an older age. So the Patriots figured, hey, our quarterback who's about to win an MVP and has won a ton of Super Bowls, let's stick with him and let's not move on to this young quarterback who is behind him. So they decided to trade Jimmy Garoppolo to the 49ers. Do you know who the 49ers had before Joe Montana? Yeah, I don't either. Or who the Broncos had before John Elway. Who did the Colts have before Johnny Unitas? Who did the Colts have in between Peyton Manning and Andrew Luck? Okay, well, that one's actually Curtis Painter, but I only remember that because he was so atrocious. The reality is, people don't really remember the guy who was before a great player unless it sort of ties into them, being about that great player, like a Drew Bledsoe to Tom Brady type situation where that's sort of part of the lore. The reality is, it doesn't matter that they sort of had to shuffle through a few guys before finding someone who they felt like could be the guy. They have the guy, and that's all that matters. It hadn't even been a full calendar year since Jimmy Garoppolo saw his team win a Super Bowl from across the sideline of Kyle Shanahan, the guy who was often criticized for his potential errors in that game. So, while Garoppolo didn't actually play in that Super Bowl, he was the backup there. The first time we saw Garoppolo get serious NFL playing time was actually a pretty famous game, but not for Garoppolo. This game was famous mostly for Bill Belichick's press conference at the end when he said that we're on to Cincinnati about 1,000 times. This was when they got blown out against the Chiefs. This was when Trent Dilfer said that, let's face it, the Patriots just aren't good anymore. Well, they would go on to win the Super Bowl this year, so that didn't really hold up too well. But what happened was they were getting blown out. They decided to bench the starters, and Garoppolo came in. And he actually played pretty well. Like, on this play, it's going to be a cover 3 zone, and that's the route that he wants to hit right there. It's Rob Gronkowski, so, a big receiver. And, this is also a lot of the very similar type of routes that you'll see Kyle Shanahan want to have his quarterbacks go to. These quick, short crossing routes, things over the middle. This is a slant route, but just quick things like this. And watch Garoppolo's pass. There's not a huge window, but he makes a great throw. And then, of course, Gronkowski is just a monster and finds a way to get into the end zone. But, we don't really care about that too much. It's more so about really just the great throw from Jimmy G. And, it was plays like that. That was part of what made Kyle Shanahan and a lot of other coaches sort of fall in love with him. But again, I want to be clear here. The reason why they went after Jimmy G wasn't just because he was a talented quarterback. He was, but, he was a second-round pick. I think a lot of people thought that he was relatively talented. But I think Shanahan noticed that he could be even more talented than potentially people realize. This is someone who can actually be potentially a really good fit for his system. I mean, take a look at this play. We'll show what he was going to do when he was actually, this is during the Deflategate suspension, so Brady is out. He got some more playing time here where he would really kind of show that he would be a perfect fit for the Kyle Shanahan system. Like on this play, it's going to be play action, it's zone coverage, receiver running over the middle. Does this look familiar at all to any of you? And watch how well this works out. Obviously, there's definitely going to be some separation here, but he's able to pull this off very well and hit his receivers. So, he helped pull off the play action, and he can do these types of things. Again, you could argue that's not a super high degree of difficulty play, but if you're going to play his system, you have to be able to pull off these types of plays. And it's good to see right there that, okay, he can pull off those types of plays. We've seen him do it in the NFL. So we could try and just draft a guy the following year. But why would we do that when we have someone who could potentially trade for who we know can do this type of thing? This plays another example. It's a cover 3 zone, and he has a receiver, again, running over the middle like that. So, pretty similar situation. This one is also play action. And watch him when he makes this play. Watch how he's going to fake the handoff, and he makes this throw while getting hit, but makes a very accurate throw, and they're able to get a first down like that. Again, basically, he's checking off all of the boxes that Kyle Shanahan would have on his checklist. He can throw under pressure. He can throw quickly. His release is probably the quickest in the NFL, at least one of the quickest. Nick Foles is great too, but it's certainly up there and definitely better than anybody he could potentially draft. But clearly, this is the guy who Shanahan would definitely want and could definitely fit Shanahan's system. He's somebody who can pretty much, do everything in this system and then some. He actually had some other things that, really don't fit the system but can still be very valuable. Like on this play, it's going to just be a go route. So, okay, we don't break down too many go routes in the Shanahan system because it doesn't do it too much. But this is another weapon that Jimmy G has as an arsenal. And, watch how he's able to take a step back. There's a wide open receiver, but his throw is perfect. That's exactly what you want to do. You don't panic when you see someone open. Sometimes when someone gets open, quarterbacks get too excited and try to get it there too quickly. But he still took his time, made a perfectly accurate throw that allowed the receiver to get into the end zone for a touchdown, which is not an easy thing necessarily to do. It was a really good throw. Should that have been a completion? Yes, it should have. 100 out of 100 times, probably 101 out of 100 times. But at the same time, he was able to really make a perfect throw. So it wasn't just the completion, but it was the throw that was very impressive, and that's one of the things that probably caught Shanahan's eye. And there's also this, which I think is very important. It's a cover 1 play, and, he has a concept that usually works towards the top of the screen that, this is something that can typically work against this coverage. So that's where Garoppolo is going to look to throw the ball to. Makes total sense. However, that is not going to work out too well. So what does he do? Well, he simply just moves around in the pocket and then finds Edelman, who was in the middle of the field, but Edelman is still able to find a way to get into the end zone for a touchdown because of a really good throw that helped lead Edelman, and also just a great job by Garoppolo of noticing where Edelman was. He made the throw in that direction, which also got him to first down and eventually got him to touchdown. So again, it's not just the fact that he can run the plays that are supposed to be ran. We've seen in the past that sometimes when Shanahan has certain quarterbacks that don't necessarily know what to do after the initial play doesn't work out, and they completely crumble under the pressure. So for someone like Jimmy Garoppolo, he's not someone who's going to crumble under the pressure. So this is a perfect thing for Shanahan. He's seemingly checking off every box yet again, and even then some, because he can do things that you shouldn't even expect a quarterback to do. And that's something that he's never had. Maybe Matt Ryan, but Matt Ryan tends to just be really good at doing what he's supposed to do. I think you can make the argument that, Jimmy Garoppolo is better at those improvisational plays than even Matt Ryan is. I think Matt Ryan's the better quarterback, but he kind of has a very good quarterback potentially that you're just not going to get. The Falcons aren't going to trade you Matt Ryan, so who else are you going to get? I mean, in the draft the following year, the quarterbacks that were drafted were Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, Josh Allen, Josh Rosen, and Allen, Darnold, and Mayfield were all drafted before the Niners had their pick. Really, Josh Rosen was the next highest guy on the board. They're probably happy that they ended up with Garoppolo, although obviously the next guy was Lamar Jackson. But, it's not so easy to blame somebody for not totally realizing that Lamar Jackson was going to be as good as he was. One more play of what made Garoppolo so great is something like this, where, he has a receiver running over the middle. This is going to be a cover 3 blitz. So keep in mind, it's a blitz here. So yes, it is zone coverage. Yes, the receiver can get open, but he's not going to have too much time, and pressure could get to him. But again, watch how he's able to move around in the pocket and make kind of an awkward throw, but it's still so accurate. They're able to get a big chunk play, and I think that's a huge thing that Shanahan wants. It seems like even his best quarterbacks that he had, even his MVP quarterback, Matt Ryan. Well, Matt Ryan, I mean, he definitely struggled a bit in the terms of the pressure. I mean, he got hit by Dante Hightower. That cost them a Super Bowl. If he found a way to get around that pressure, not sure if it could have been done, but if he did, they win the Super Bowl. He throws a touchdown on the play and they win. But since he didn't, now, I mean, you have someone who potentially can. Again, I'm not saying Jimmy Garoppolo is better than Matt Ryan, but I'm just saying this is an extra asset that he maybe didn't have before that can be very good. And Matt Ryan, of course, is by far and away the best quarterback that Shanahan has had. There's a French story called the Magic Yarn story, and basically the way it works is that there's this boy who he's always bored in school all the time. He hates being in school and he's bored mindless. And eventually a witch gives him this ball of yarn. And the way it works is that every time you pull the ball of yarn a little bit, well, then he fast forwards in time a little bit. And so the idea is that he says, okay, great, I can just go to school, pull the yarn, and fast forward. I never have to deal with school again. This is awesome. So he does that, and eventually he goes off and he goes to college, and college is still pretty boring. So he continues to pull the yarn, and eventually he's gonna get a job. He gets a wife. He's pretty happy. However, then there's a war, and he doesn't want to have to go through the war, so he pulls the yarn some more. It just skips those years of the war, and I think you sort of get how this is going. There's more and more bad things. He now hates his job, so he skips through that, but, pays well, so that way he can do well on the weekends. But eventually, he just keeps skipping and keeps skipping and keeps skipping, and he barely lives his life, and he dies, and, nothing really good happens. And it's also been used to a much worse extent in the movie Click. If you've seen that one, not really the best movie, but good sensual theme behind it, even if it wasn't executed perfectly. And I feel like this is kind of the beginning of Jimmy Garoppolo's career. He kind of had that ball of yarn pulled a little bit, where despite the fact that he is a very talented player, he just wasn't able to really get that showcased because of the fact that, he was behind Brady. But now he finally would get his opportunity. He would start the last 5 games of the season. Garoppolo would instantly get on and just have a tremendous season. I mean, he would just really be rolling. His first actual start where he's not necessarily filling in for somebody else, but is going to be the starter, was against the Bears, and he played very well. This was an example where, a lot going on. It's going to be play action. He's going to roll out sort of towards the top of the screen. He also has another player rolling out with him, so I guess not that much going on, but, a little bit going on right here. Not necessarily the highest degree of difficulty, but what's really interesting is watch his footwork here. Watch how he has to do a total rotation like that, but he is able to turn around and be able to make a throw to get the ball all the way inside the 35. So, just little things like that, his footwork, his ability to throw off balance, those things really do help in a Shanahan-style system where it's not necessarily that things are going to be perfect and, everything's going to be just traditional, because it's often anything but traditional with Shanahan. It can be very complex at times, and, very much you have to do different things. A quarterback is already so important in the NFL, but in the Kyle Shanahan system, which can change, but for the most part, with Shanahan, he relies heavily on his quarterback, and for a good reason with Garoppolo. This is another example where it's going to be a cover 3 zone blitz, and he has a receiver running over the middle. So, these things certainly can work out, as we've often seen. The offensive line is going to hold, but what I like about this is watch how Garoppolo is going to make this throw, but I like his release. Look how quickly he makes that release. It just, from the time he decides, okay, yes, I'm going to throw it, to the time he throws it is like no time at all. And so, again, part of this system is relying on your quarterback to be able to make correct reads to some degree. So the fact that he gets extra time to make his read because his throw can be, given so quickly, well, that just adds some extra, abilities for him, and it really does work out in a huge way. This plays another good example where what's going to happen is that it's going to be just pretty simple slant routes. So again, nothing too crazy here, but I just like watch where he's going to put this ball. This is pinpoint accuracy, exactly where he needs to throw it. So he really needed a quarterback, and he has a quarterback. I mean, being able to have someone who can make those pinpoint accuracy throws, that's very valuable. There's only a handful of guys in the league who can do that. Garoppolo is one of those guys. Like, watch, this is another example where it's a cover one blitz, and he has a receiver running an out route. So again, pretty simple. I mean, this isn't anything too fancy whatsoever, but watch again this perfect pinpoint accuracy throw where he's able to make the throw and allow his player to pick up much more yards after the catch. A lot of times people sort of use yards after the catch to discredit a quarterback. They'll say, well, yeah, he's great, but look at all these yards after the catch. It's more so the receivers doing the work. But oftentimes you get good yards after the catch because of a perfectly accurate throw. And that's what Garoppolo is doing. You would see someone like a Brian Hoyer, he would make that throw. They would get that completion, but then it would probably be a quick tackle and they wouldn't get much else. But Garoppolo can make that throw in a way where they're able to gain so many more yards. So he's making things easier for really the entire offense, for the entire team. Every play that he's a part of is working better. And even the running game, because, he's completing passes, which now opens things up for the running game. And his timing is great too. His timing on these plays, it's amazing to think about, where these are guys who he just started playing with a handful of weeks ago. And watch this play. It's going to be a cover one play. He has a receiver running a curl route. And for a curl route, I mean, timing is so important on these types of routes. You want to really sometimes throw it before they're even getting ready to cut, just simply because the second you do cut back in, you pretty much kind of hang out a little bit. You will move back in to some degree, but for the most part, ideally, you want to stay as far deep as you can. And basically, the defensive back is then going to try to come back and close in that gap as much as possible. And once he does close that gap, it's not like a slant route where, if you close a gap, the receiver can just keep running and hopefully get open further. It's the opposite. Once it's closed, it's pretty much closed, and you have to try to improvise and do something else. So timing on these routes is so important. And even though there's pressure, Garoppolo is able to make a perfectly timed throw, and they're able to get this first down right here. So, the fact that he's doing that with guys who he's just started playing with, it's only going to go up from there. He's only going to do a better job of being able to get guys to be able to make those types of plays in the future, which is just another thing that you have hope for heading into the next season. He's someone who he hasn't played a lot of NFL games, but you know what? Him being able to just sort of tear the league apart and even beat good teams is definitely very promising. I mean, this plays another example of just a really good play, I think. I love his patience on this play. It's a cover two man. He has a couple of receivers basically running a rub route, pick route, whatever you want to call it. And so, you can make this throw whenever. But he knows that typically on these types of plays, sometimes it's more open the longer you wait, and it's further downfield the longer you wait. So watch how he just waits, because he knows he has time. And then when the pressure finally starts to come, that's when he makes his throw. Just allows him to pick up an extra couple of yards, Nothing crazy on that play necessarily, but again, a good quarterback like Garoppolo, it's just gaining extra yards on every play that, as a play caller, you expect 4 yards, but Garoppolo turns a 4-yard play into an 8-yard play, as opposed to some of his guys that were turning 4-yard plays into 0-yard plays. So he just adds the extra benefit, and, that's a huge reason why, hey, for a second-round pick, this was honestly kind of a steal. I suppose it is worth mentioning that the 49ers, just this past draft, they did pass on a couple of quarterbacks, one of which was Patrick Mahomes, another which was Deshaun Watson. So you could criticize them there, and, maybe that's a video for another day. But in terms of this trade, Garoppolo is playing great, and he really can't stop winning. I mean, at this point, he hadn't lost in the NFL. This was another very good play. It's a cover two man, has a receiver running over the middle. So, this is a pretty good situation. But what's going to happen here is that if you look closely at what I have on the screen, you notice that I have 2 Charger players who are covering the halfback right here, and nobody is covering tight end, which is obviously not typically what you do in football. Typically, you have somebody covering every eligible receiver, not two guys covering one of them and none covering the other. The reason for this, obviously, is that they screwed up. Kittle was going to be completely open. One of them was supposed to cover Kittle, but one of them screwed up. It's impossible to know which one because we weren't there on the sideline when one of them got yelled at. But there's a clear cross up here. And watch how Kittle gets wide open, but watch how quickly Garoppolo notices it and gets the ball to him. I mean, a lot of guys wouldn't notice those types of things. I mean, certainly Beathard, the rookie, wouldn't, and I don't even know about Hoyer, even though he's been in the league for a while. But Garoppolo, despite being pretty young, is certainly very NFL ready. And, that's another thing, too. I mean, you look at someone like Johnny Manziel, who was not even close to being NFL ready. Well, Shanahan didn't want anything to do with him. He was, he literally left the team because he realized that the Browns were going to say you have to start Manziel next year, and he realized that was going to be bad for him, and that was going to make himself look worse, and he wants an NFL coaching job, so he's not going to accept that responsibility, and obviously that worked out great. He got the Atlanta job. In a situation like this, not only is he getting someone who has a ton of potential, but he's getting somebody who has a ton of potential and who can, make some really talented plays today. So it's not just the potential, but he also, he's a young, talented quarterback who can not make a lot of mistakes, but can make a lot of good throws. And he got him for a second-round pick. It's great, but there is one catch. And that catch is that they would have to pay him. They would have to pay him a big contract because his last contract just ended with the Patriots. So he's no longer on his rookie deal. They're going to have to give him a big contract. And they did. They made him the highest paid quarterback in football, which is kind of crazy for a guy who's only started 7 games. But at the same time, you know what? They like what they saw with him. And in football, everything you do is going to be a risk. There is no decision you make that isn't a risk. But they felt like, you know what, we give him a big contract. We now have the quarterback that we can fit this system around and truly have some success. Unfortunately, in 2018, he only played 3 games before getting injured, and he was out for the whole season. So definitely a very frustrating situation, but it had its silver lining, I mean, yes, another piece of that yarn got pulled out, but at the same time, now Shanahan, for the first time in his career, really had an opportunity to experiment with a backup quarterback. Yes, he's played with poor quarterback play in the past, but that was always still, he had to try and figure out if these quarterbacks could be starters. But this was the first time that he was in a situation where he didn't have to really worry about what his backup quarterbacks were doing. He could try and see if they could continue to be backups. This is Nick Mullins now being the backup. He could see if Mullins wanted to be a backup. But really what he could also do was just throw things at the wall and see what would stick. He could get as creative as he wanted to be, especially with his run blocking, and just see if things worked out. See if he can make the playbook a little bit more complicated and those guys can make those blocks. He could just get as creative as he wanted to, throw things at the wall, and see what would stick. Like on this play, for example, the blocking concept, it's not too crazy. He has the fullback went out and block an edge rusher. Then he then has his left tackle block a linebacker, left guard and center double team an interior lineman, and then the left guard moves up to block a linebacker. That part's nothing too crazy, but what's interesting here is how they're going to go about doing this. They're going to basically fake as though it's going to be run to the right. So watch how to have not just the halfback, but also Juszczyk start off as they're going to the right. Then they're going to move to the left, and they're able to pick up a ton of yards that way. Again, just kind of clever, Not a lot of teams are doing these types of things with the running game. A lot of people just run very basically, which is, there's some logic to just running basically. You're not going to have your own players screw up if you are doing the same thing every time. But I think there's way more logic behind doing this, and I think that Shanahan has proven it constantly that he can have way more success doing things like this. And even this play, what's going to happen is that you're going to see a right guard, a right tackle, and then a tight end block those 3 players right there. And you notice that the Oakland player who I have circled, he is unblocked right here. So typically you would say, okay, well, it's probably not going to be a run in that direction. But actually it is. But what they're also going to do is have a receiver run back as though he could potentially be taking a handoff, which will kind of fool the edge rusher, which makes some sense. I mean, if you're an edge rusher, you're going to think, okay, wait, if I'm not getting blocked here, it can't be a run towards me. They're probably trying to trick me of some way, so I got to make sure I don't get fooled here. But by the time that he realizes that actually is a run, it's too late. He's taken out of the play, and Mustard is able to just continue running and pick up a huge gain. And since, other teams were fearing the running game, they were able to have success through the passing game. Like on this play, it's play action, and you have a receiver running over the top. He's not even running over the middle. He's running relatively deep on this one. But because Oakland is so afraid of a potential run, watch how well it works. Watch how a receiver just gets completely by everybody, and it's a mix-up, and they're able to get a touchdown. I mean, that's not going to happen every time you run that play, but it will happen on occasion that guys just screw up, and it's a lot easier for them to screw up when you're having so much success through the running game. It really is. This play was also so much fun, where it's going to be play action, and then they're gonna flash a player over to the bottom of the screen. They're gonna flash a tight end over in that direction. So this is actually going to be a tight end screen. But there's a brilliance of this play where, he fakes the handoff, and you look at those two Seattle linebackers, they're immediately trying to get back over the middle because they're like, oh, shoot, this is play action now. Okay, they're going to throw it over the top of us. We have to get back immediately. But they're actually not doing that. One of them doesn't even notice. He's facing the wrong way. And because of this, they can simply just flip it up, and it's a very easy throw to make, really. That was to George Kittle, who we also saw really have a breakout season this year. He had a fantastic year with San Francisco, and he kind of just really came into his own and showed what he could do. So, while maybe some of the players really wouldn't go on to do much with this team, what really I think this season did for Shanahan was just kind of allowed him to just play around, allowed him to tinker with stuff. He didn't have to worry about, can this guy be a franchise quarterback or not. And he didn't really have to worry about, am I going to keep my job? Because most people realize you lose your franchise quarterback, or, at least your starting quarterback, things aren't going to go too well for you. So, he kind of just had a chance to do whatever he wanted. And he really succeeded a lot at just doing whatever he wanted and sort of just having some fun with it. The season itself honestly, the season itself was rather terrible. They went 4-12, which actually still wasn't the worst in their division, but it definitely was, pretty disappointing to say the least. But, they did have some positives. One of the biggest positives was they found out that they had one of the best tight ends in football in George Kittle. That kind of thing always helps. They also added Richard Sherman on the defensive side, who has played very well. Basically the Shanahan style was just, hey, let's get a bunch of talent on defense and run kind of a basic, cover 3 zone for the most part on defense, and let's get a bunch of talent there. And then on offense, I'll just trust myself that I can sort of scheme guys open as long as I have the good quarterback. So they would add more talent through the draft. They would go out and they would get Nick Bosa, who would eventually win Defensive Player of the Year in 2019, and they were ready to go. This was the season that they had to make things work. They also added Fred Warner through the draft, in the 2018 draft. So, this is a team that's already good and just looking better and better. This is a very talented football team, and again, it would just get better. Like, look at this drive, for example. What's going to happen is that this is, it's your first play. Okay, nothing too fancy. You have a double team with an interior lineman. You're also then going to have your tight end block defensive lineman. So, okay, seems relatively simple, right? And it pretty much is. I mean, this is nothing too fancy. The halfback kind of jumps over and does sort of a tumble type thing, which is fun. But for the most part, pretty basic play. You gain a couple yards. Nothing too crazy. It's one of the rare times a Kyle Shanahan-led team runs up the middle. It's one of the rare times they don't do too much. But, still, okay, but you gain a couple yards. Now what happens on second down? They ran up the middle, so now they're going to try something else. They're going to get a little bit creative with it. Instead, what they're going to do is they're going to just have a jet sweep right here. So, okay, nothing too crazy. Again, a little bit more unique. This could be what some teams would consider their wild, but with Shanahan, this is just kind of more of the same. But, they have a couple players move out to block those Bengals. There's another one who's unblocked, but, the idea is that he just won't really be expecting a run in that direction. This play works out okay. They're able to pick up a few yards, get close to the first down now. They're about 2 yards shy of it. So now it's a third down and short. So they're just simply going to go to the other side now. They're going to run a play action, and it's going to be Juszczyk, their fullback. He's going to run out to the flat in that direction as well. And again, they're just going to be able to gain these few yards. Juszczyk is able to outrun the Cincinnati player, and just with a little simple play, they're able to get the first down. This might not seem like much, but what really is interesting about this is they're being very basic and still picking up a first down, which is interesting. I find this very interesting because it's really all just to set up. Honestly, that's what Shanahan is doing. He's just running 3 plays in a row that are all setup plays, which doesn't make a ton of sense usually, because there's a big chance that backfires. One of those plays doesn't work out, and now your plans are ruined. But if it does work out, you can then do this, where it's going to be a cover 3 zone. What they're going to do is they're going to have a play action and a player run over the middle. You're probably thinking, okay, well, sure, I get it. What this is, you run a couple small plays, get things to the outside, then you run play action, get linebackers to move in, throw over the middle. Oh, of course, this makes a ton of sense. You don't have to explain this too much, Jackson. We get it. We've seen this happen 100 times already in this series. We're aware of what goes on. But this isn't what's happening. They're acting as though this is what their typical setup would be, but then they're going to have another 49er player run over there. So this is going to get that Cincinnati player who's in charge of covering the bottom left third of the screen to move further in, so then they can have another player run deep and he can get wide open. This is setting up as though you're doing something, and then you're going to do something else. You're basically just twisting their expectations against itself, and watch how they get a 49er player just completely wide open. Not just because of the good play call, but also in a large part because of just the good decision and really the good setup, I think, by Shanahan. That was a big way they were able to have success, and I think that's really kind of just how this whole offense, I think, as a whole worked. I could break down 100 plays if I wanted to, but the reality is they finally had receivers now. They had guys who can make plays. They have an elite tight end, someone who can beat man coverage, which forces you into zone a lot. They have Shanahan, who now is probably at his best in terms of run schemes that maybe we've ever seen in football. There's no way to really stop this offense too much. And oh, by the way, they have one of the best defenses, if not the best defense in football, to go along with it. And because of this, they would pretty much go unchecked just throughout this season. Maybe that's a bit of hyperbole. They would certainly have some losses here and there, some tough losses, actually quite a few tough losses, weirdly. Despite the talent of this team, they lost in overtime in Week 10 to fall to 8-1. That was their first loss of the season. They also lost as time expired in Week 13 to fall to 10-2. And then in Week 15, they lost as time expired to fall to 11-3. So actually, that was all 3 of their losses. They finally held on to win Week 17 to win their division, but all 3 of the losses came as time expired, weirdly enough. But as a whole, they were pretty much just dominating left and right, and they were winning games pretty handedly. Some games they were just completely blowing the brakes off of opposing teams. And because of this, things went well even in the playoffs. They beat Minnesota pretty handedly. They won 27-10. So in the NFC Championship game, with a home game, well, who would they play? Well, the same team that Kyle Shanahan went up against just a couple years prior when he went on to lose the Super Bowl to the Patriots. He would play those very same Green Bay Packers, going up against the very same quarterback on the opposite side of the field in Aaron Rodgers. Well, I broke down every play of the first drive of the last NFC Championship game. Might as well do the same here, because actually it'll have a very similar effect. It really goes to show, I think, just how this game went as a whole, where it's going to be a cover 2 zone that Green Bay is in, and this is the play. They're going to run play action, and then simply just hit a receiver running to the bottom half of the screen. Pretty simple, nothing too fancy. We've seen these things happen a lot, and, typically this would just go for a few yards. That's typically how this would work, but that's because typically we wouldn't have someone like Deebo Samuel who's going to be catching this ball. Deebo Samuel is someone I haven't talked about much, but he's going to be a huge part of this team. And watch how he's able to stay in bounds and pick up a ton of yards that way. He's kind of one of those guys who, he might not necessarily be the most talented all-around receiver. That's why he went in the second round, but he's someone who fits this system so well. He's so good at running over the middle. He's so good at taking screen passes. He's kind of like a much less good Julio Jones in that sense, where Julio Jones really excels. That's also where Samuel excels, just to a much lesser extent. They're similar players. Obviously, Jones is way better, but he does the same sort of style to a much smaller degree. So they started at their own 11, so, now they're getting back to basically where you would typically start a drive. So good play, but, you still have a lot of work to do. And what they're going to do is they're now going to sort of just go to the opposite end. They actually will do this a lot where, they get you going to one end, we'll move you to the other end, kind of just get you going back and forth a little bit. Obviously, it's not so simple as they just go back and forth because that would be easy to catch on to, but they will do this from time to time. And those are the blocks. Everyone tries to block those Green Bay players just to run to the top of the screen. Again, nothing too crazy, and it's going to work out decently well. He's able to run over. There is actually a missed block, so they don't gain a ton of yards, but still a solid run there, and you're able to pick up some yards and make a pretty easy second down situation. And so on this second down, it's going to be a cover 2 zone. That's what they're going up against, and Samuel was running that route right there. Another route that he can excel at, and it's pretty good against this type of coverage, so it works out pretty well in that regard as well. It's definitely a pretty good situation on paper. Shanahan's doing a pretty good job of calling this game so far, kind of just getting the better of Mike Pettin, the defensive coordinator who he's going up against. And, there's some logic behind that too. He's not unfamiliar with Pettin. Pettin was the guy who was the head coach of the Cleveland Browns when Shanahan was there. He was someone who knows, potentially Pettin was a guy who was wanting Shanahan to maybe even start Manziel, and he was the one who was starting Manziel. Maybe if it was Shanahan there, he could have had more leeway and could have gotten Manziel not started. And maybe Mike Pettin is the reason that really Shanahan isn't in Cleveland anymore. That's a strong possibility. Not saying that's true, but there is something there, and I think that Shanahan probably maybe wants to beat him just an extra little bit. Maybe would feel even better winning this game against someone who he maybe has some not fond memories of, although for all we know, Pettin also didn't want Manziel to start. We don't really know. The next play would be this one where a bit to unpack here. A lot of guys are going to be pulling over, though. That's the real thing. You're going to see a lot of guys pulling over. So, again, getting very creative here. They're not having these traditional running plays, and Mustard is going to take the ball. And, he's able to run over. It works out pretty well. They get a solid gain. So, again, things are working out pretty well. This is going to now be a second down situation. So, you gain some yards, make the second down a little bit easier. It's going to be a second down and 4. So, good job there. And now what they're going to do is they're going to have Garoppolo. He runs back, fakes a handoff. Then he's going to actually throw it to the halfback. Basically, the idea is that the Green Bay player who I have circled, he runs in when he thinks it's a run, but then when he sees this play action, he then maybe turns his back or just struggles to get back, gets a little bit, off balance, and then you're able to hit the halfback and get him further down the field and put him in a better situation than potentially he could be. However, it just doesn't work out well. He plays this one perfectly. He's able to run over and make the play. Just a great play right there. They lose a couple of yards, and now it's going to be a 3rd down and 8, and you're just outside field goal range. So you went from potentially having a great situation to now you just got to struggle to make sure you can get a field goal. It would be a long field goal from here, and ideally you would like to get the first down, though, and keep things alive that way. And what would happen is this, bit to unpack here, but basically what's going to happen is that there's going to be an edge rusher who, the yellow line you see going to the right, he is going to be running over in that direction. He's going to be running to the right because he's actually going to get unblocked at the line. Instead, what they're going to do is they're going to have their left tackle move up and block a linebacker right there, which might seem like a mistake. But what they're also going to do is they're going to have their right guard move over and he will block that Green Bay player. But actually, I said he's an edge rusher. He is not an edge rusher. There's also an edge rusher underneath him who is going to be unblocked right here. So you have someone completely unblocked, someone else who's unblocked at the line. But basically, Shanahan is saying, I think this play is going to work. And even though it's not really something I've tried too much, I'm going to try it here on a 3rd down in the NFC Championship game early on, where this could be a pivotal point in this game. I'm going to just do something that maybe has never been done before in terms of how aggressive he's going to call this game, and it works. It gets him past the first down part, and Mostert is able to do a great job to move around to safety, gets all the way into the end zone for a touchdown, and they took the lead, and they would not give the lead back. Green Bay would really struggle to try to even stay in this game. It was all San Francisco, and the 49ers were able to win this game and punch their ticket to the Super Bowl, this time against a different AFC powerhouse. It will not be the Bill Belichick-led New England Patriots. It will instead be the Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes-led Kansas City Chiefs. 'Cause Everybody loves a good redemption story. Well, that's what people say, but do we? I mean, really, do we? Think about those three I just talked about earlier, like the Broncos. I mean, are people really talking about, wait, what a great redemption story by the Broncos on that one? Maybe to some degree, but I think more people will bring up their historic loss to the Jacksonville Jaguars. I definitely think more people are remembering that the Virginia 1 seed lost to a 16 seed than they're remembering just a championship the following year, even though for Virginia, they'll totally take that. The Bruins, they totally get criticized for that 0-3 loss. No one really cares if they won a Stanley Cup the following year. So I do think that all this talk of people love redemption stories, I don't think people do. I think people enjoy a story more when somebody does not redeem themselves. I think people enjoy giant collapses more. I mean, think about the 2004 Boston Red Sox when they won a World Series for the first time in 86 years. As crazy as that is, and a redemption story of sorts, what most people remember from that was the Yankees blowing a 3-0 lead for the first and still only time in baseball history. People don't really love redemption stories the way we say we do. I mean, think about movies. When is there a redemption story? It's usually just a story of somebody overcoming a great obstacle. It's not really redemption, because usually they don't start from the top, fall, and then climb back to the top. It happens here and there, but that's not really what typically happens. People don't really love redemption stories as much as we like to say we do. I think we like to say we love redemption stories. I mean, that makes sense, right? Because we want to feel like we're good people. Oh, we love redemption stories, but people, I think, way more often love stories of failure and heartbreak. When Kyle Shanahan first called plays for a Super Bowl, they didn't score early on and took them a bit to get going. So in this Super Bowl, things would go a lot better early on. They definitely got going a bit quicker. This is their first drive. What's going to happen is that Garoppolo is going to fake a handoff to the halfback, and then he's simply going to throw it out to his tight end, George Kittle. And also, Kittle's going to help sell this by faking as though he's running towards the middle and then running to the outside, which will help give him a little bit more space. And does work out pretty well. I mean, right after the ball is snapped, Garoppolo makes an off-balance throw very effectively, and Kittle is able to get the first down. I mean, quite frankly, maybe the Garoppolo to Kittle connection isn't quite as good as Matt Ryan to Julio Jones, but it's still pretty good and definitely something that can be very effective. On the very next play, they would run this play, where what's going to happen is that it is going to be a play action, but then he's going to flip it back to his receiver, Deebo Samuel, who's going to be running around towards the top of the screen. You also have a couple of creative blocks going on right there in the bottom part of the screen, which can, also help sell that this is going to be a run potentially. And really, it's just going to fool the two linebackers, the ones you see in the box. That's what it's really going to fool, because watch how, if you watch them, they both move very far in, expecting a run. So when Samuel gets the ball, he's able to not have to worry about those linebackers, and he does a great job of running after the catch, which gets him all the way inside the Kansas City Chiefs territory just like that. There's a couple of good play calls, and just like that, they have a position to take the lead, very early on, which is definitely very key. However, on the third down play, this is a huge one. If you can convert here, you can go up 7, which is obviously a big difference than going up 3. It's a difference of 4 points for you math fans out there. And really, this is the way that it's going to work. It's a cover one hole type play. So, that is going to be Kittle's route. It's a route that it can work, but it's going to take some time. He's running into a double team, but then he's running directly out of it. So when he gets out of it, that's where he could potentially get open. That's where Garoppolo wants to throw this ball to. However, he never really is too open throughout this. It's well covered, and also the ball was tipped, so it didn't really matter too much anyways. But, third down situation, they had an opportunity to convert and potentially get a touchdown, but they failed. Definitely a bit disappointing for Garoppolo and for the 49ers as a whole, but also not the end of the world. They would kick a field goal to take the lead, but that lead would not last long. Kansas City would have a long drive to eventually get a touchdown. And so now in the second quarter, the 49ers would like to answer. They would like to get some points back, ideally a touchdown themselves, and retake the lead. That's how football works. So, again, nothing too crazy happening right here, just sort of traditional football, but something very odd would happen here. Garoppolo, someone who has been pretty, intelligent throughout the course of him being a 49er and just in the NFL in general, someone who has been very accurate and very good at throwing the ball deep. and also very good at throwing the ball under pressure, is going to do none of those things on this play. It's a cover one hole. He has a receiver that's going to be running towards the sideline. So, that's where he wants to hit. This is something that can always work out. This is where that you want to throw this ball to. So, on paper, it makes sense, but as I kind of alluded to, there is going to be pressure. However, watch what Garoppolo is going to do. While he's under pressure, he makes a throw and basically just lobs one up there, which results in an easy interception. I get why he wanted to make that throw. Samuel is pretty good at making those contested catches, but it's just a throw he shouldn't have made. He let the pressure get to him, and, in the biggest of moments, he made a crucial error, which resulted in an interception. Kansas City would end up kicking a field goal with the good field position, so not a disaster, but now it's going to be a 10-3 game, and really, this game can get out of hand if you get a quick 3-and-out or another turnover here. With Patrick Mahomes going against your defense, yes, your defense is great, but Mahomes is great as well, so it's something you want to avoid if possible. And what they're going to do is they're going to just try to get back to the basics, They're saying, okay, Garoppolo, he might not have it right now. He just was not able to get a connection to Kittle. Kittle was covered up pretty nicely, so that connection is a bit off. He just made a very bad throw. So what did we do last time we didn't have Garoppolo? Well, we relied on our running game. Let's go back to relying on our running game. That's what they're going to do here. That's the blocking concept. So as you can tell from the concept itself, it is obviously going to be a run to the left side of the screen, and that it is, and it's going to be blocked very well. They're able to run over, and Mostert is able to get the first down just like that. Then they would do something like this, where what they're going to do is they're going to have, a couple players block the wedge there, and Mostert is going to run out to lead block. He's not going to be the guy who's going to be running it. Instead, what you're going to do is then have Samuel run over. He will basically catch a quick flip pass to himself, from Garoppolo to himself, and then he's going to try to run in between that gap. And basically, this is kind of the perfect counter to the fact that, you kind of say, well, since you have a quarterback who is back there, well, then he obviously isn't going to block or run up the football. But this is kind of a way that you can still get that extra blocker, sort of like an RG3 type situation where you now get that extra blocker. But instead of it being because the quarterback is running, it's because somebody else who's coming from across the field is now going to be running with the football. It's definitely a clever idea, and it's going to work out, again, very well. Samuel is able to run up, and he's able to get another first down. Just like that, they have 2 quick first downs and are looking in pretty good shape. And when those clever plays are working, well, this is going to spread the defense out where they can now do something simple. Just have their left guard and center double team an interior lineman. The guard moves up to block a player in the middle of the field, and a tackle just has to make a block. This is really simple, but when they run it, it's simply a good play. It's another first down just like that. They're running the ball and getting first downs on first downs. So then they would do something like this. It's a lot of blocks, going to the left side of the screen. That's the way this is going to work. So, obviously it's pretty clear to tell this is going to be a run play to the left side of the screen. And really what's going to come down to on this one, it's just going to be a really well-blocked play. You notice everybody is getting accounted for. The only people that are not getting blocked are really the main guy is going to be Frank Clark on the edge, but again, they also have a couple players who are going to move to the right side of the screen, so that's going to sort of fool some Kansas City players. And like Juszczyk, for example, he runs over to the right, so that kind of makes him think, hey, maybe this is going to be play action. Garoppolo also runs in that direction, so that helps sell the potential play action. Again, you do have to be wary of these things. So when Coleman takes the ball and runs, all he has to do is make one move, and that was just because of a missed block, and he's able to pick up a first down. So again, they're rolling right here. Things are working out perfectly. At this point, now it's very easy to run a play action, and that's what they're finally going to do. Little play action, quickly get the ball to Samuel, nothing too crazy. And right after the ball is snapped, Samuel gets open, Garoppolo hits him, and, again, guess what they get? Another first down. Just really, they don't have to worry about the second down marker at this point. They're not even facing second downs here. Things are just working out, and they're working out well. Shanahan's play calls are working out well. The offense is, they're blocking well. Their halfbacks are running well. The receivers are getting open well. This is just going very effectively for San Francisco. And even when things that are play calls don't necessarily work out perfectly, sometimes just good players can make good plays, Like on this play, what's going to happen is that it is going to be play action. Garoppolo is then going to loop around. He's going to try to hit Kyle Juszczyk, their fullback, who's going to run over. So, it's a fullback, not necessarily the best receiving option typically, so you can totally understand if he isn't able to make this play. But he is going to be able to make this play, because watch how well, even though it's actually going to be covered up nicely, so you think that would be a bad thing, Juszczyk is finally able to still find a way to make the grab, get into the end zone for a touchdown, and just like that, they're able to tie a game that was starting to look like it might get ugly, it might get out of hand. I mean, that's just a tremendous play from really a tremendous drive from everyone's perspective. You talk about a perfect offense, well, they were just about perfect there. I mean, the Kansas City defense at that point has to be thinking, okay, things did not work out too well for us. The one bright side is that this would be the last drive of the half. They would get another opportunity, but for the most part, this was the last drive of the half because they only got 3 drives. So despite the fact that the 49ers, put up 10 points in 3 drives against a pretty good defense, which is definitely a pretty good thing. It's a tied game largely due to the fact that Mahomes is on the other side. He's very good, but despite the little amount of drives, the defense has to be a bit flustered. And really, as I said, the 49ers would get one other opportunity. With a minute left, they would get the ball back, and, listen, Kyle Shanahan, he's going to try to call this one a little bit better than he called his 1-minute drive in Super Bowl 51. But actually, there was a bit of a bizarre moment. They had Mostert he would just run, and they kind of let 30 seconds go off the play clock, which I didn't totally understand. I mean, you think that, hey, listen, you lost the Super Bowl by not having urgency. Now he's being conservative here and trying to run out the clock. They would eventually get a first down and get the ball to around close to midfield. And at this point, with 14 seconds left, now they're saying let's take a shot, which was a mistake. I mean, it just was. Shanahan, for all of his things that he does well, his 1-minute drills are abysmal. I mean, he's screwed up 2 Super Bowls with his 1-minute drive at this point. He's done them terribly, so that has to be mentioned. But, it's no harm, no foul if you can convert here. And they're going to have Kittle run a deep route. It's going to be man coverage. There's 3 players deep. This is something that could potentially get open. It looks like it might end up being a one-on-one matchup if no other Kansas City player picks him up. And spoiler alert, no other player is. He gets the one-on-one matchup that he wants. Garoppolo actually makes a really good throw, and they rule this offensive pass interference, which is kind of weak. That's not a really, I think a lot of people would argue that's not the correct call right there. It looks even worse in the all-22 footage. It didn't look that bad when you did the slow-mo footage, but there was clearly some hand fighting. They decided to call it on Kittle. That's kind of a break that went against the 49ers. There was something there. I'm not going to say there wasn't anything there, but definitely kind of a break. And, that could have allowed the Niners to actually take the lead, which would have been huge given how it looked sort of in that mid-second quarter. But you know what? They will take a 10-10, game at this point, go to halftime for a long halftime break in a tie game. You can't complain too much about that. So to start things off in the second half, this would be a 2nd down and 5, and they're going to run play action, and it's going to be Emmanuel Sanders running a quick slant route right over there. Oh yeah, Emmanuel Sanders. Remember him? Another guy I haven't really talked too much about, but he deserves to be talked about. I mean, he's another one of those veteran players who really kind of fits that bob and weave style that really Shanahan wants to get his guys to bring on. He's somebody who can make a move and move to the other side and really, work out that way. And he plays the chess game, which you want in your receivers to find a way to get open. It makes a lot of sense. And watch on this play, he is going to be able to get open. Sanders is someone that they acquired in the middle of this season. So, another time they were able to get someone mid-season to have some success. And he's been really good for them. And he was able to make that catch there and get them further down the field. It's the Super Bowl. Shanahan had an extra week to prepare, and he had some creative play calls, like on this one. It's going to be a couple of blocks, and you're going to have the fullback basically fake as though he's going to be running towards the bottom of the screen. You even have Garoppolo. He's going to fake as though it's going to be a handoff in that direction, but then he will actually flip it back to the wide receiver who's running in that direction. So again, getting creative here for sure, and why not? It's the Super Bowl. Call all of your best plays. You don't know if you'll ever have another opportunity like this, and it works out well. Samuel, once again, who's running the ball, is able to get a first down right here. So, Again, just sort of some fun play calls, some fun creativity, and it's working too. It's not needless. There is a why behind all of these plays, and that question of will it work out is being answered with a resounding yes, as they're able to get the ball to midfield. They would then run this play where they're going up against the cover 3 zone, and what they're going to do is they're going to have play action with Samuel running over the middle, sort of like that. But, that's going to cause, he's not going to go totally over the middle. Instead, it is going to cause the Kansas City player in charge of covering the area closest to the top of the screen in the middle of the field to also go further deep. And then what they're going to do is have Juszczyk sort of run underneath like that. And because of this, basically, you can only cover one of those 2 players. So that's kind of the idea behind this. And it's going to work out really well. I mean, watch how, a Kansas City player does go deep, and now Juszczyk is able to run over. He gets open. They're able to pick up some yards right there, even though a linebacker did notice what was going on and try to get over. He just didn't have the time at that point to totally get over. Again, sometimes just a split second. Sometimes that's honestly all you need, and that was an example of one of those times. It was all they needed. So, they're able to get the ball inside the 30 right here, and now they're going to do this play, where those are the 3 things that could, those are the 3 routes. It's really 2 separate things that can happen. It's sort of a rub route on the bottom of the screen, and then also Kittle over the middle. This is where Garoppolo really has to make a decision. This is actually a couple plays later, so this is a 3rd down and 5 situation. And really, Garoppolo, he could do 2 things. He could look at the rub route at the bottom of the screen, or look at Kittle. These are 2 routes that could absolutely work out very well. And look at what's happening right after the ball is snapped. Okay, obvious decision. Kittle was going to get wide open, whereas the rub route isn't even close to getting open. There is no separation there. So throw it over the middle, hit Kittle, get inside the 20-yard line. That'll also get you a 1st down, and you can keep going. But Garoppolo, he's just a bit off this game. He's just not being the quarterback that can run a perfect offense necessarily. He's going to throw this to the wrong player, which results in it not being able to be, it actually is complete, but not being able to get the 1st down. It's going to be a 4th down and 1 here, and Shanahan decides to play it safe and kicks the field goal, which, you can say, hey, you always go for the, touchdown on a 4th and 1, but at the end of the day, they're leading in the Super Bowl now, and they would get the ball back. So now with 5 minutes left in the 3rd quarter, you're up 13-10 in the Super Bowl. There are worse places to be. On this play, Shanahan would really just get back to the basics for kind of the first time all game, despite the fact that he'd been calling a pretty good game, even though he hadn't necessarily been going to his bread and butter. He's going to run play action and then, have a receiver run over in the middle. This is something he loves to do. He probably has a poster of this play hanging over his wall somewhere, and it's going to work out very well. Samuel is able to run over. He gets wide open, makes the catch. They get a solid amount of yards on that play. So definitely pretty good. It's now a 1st down, and you got a big chunk of yards, and you're inside Kansas City territory where you can potentially try and kick a field goal again, potentially to go up by 6, but really you want a touchdown. You want to go up 2 scores against a great offense, even though that great offense hasn't been doing so much so far tonight. What they're going to do on the next play is something that Shanahan doesn't do too often, and you will see why on this play. It's the dreaded run up the middle. There's tough blocks to make on this, and it's not going to work out too well. It only gets a couple of yards. He likes to sprinkle these in every now and then. I mean, I do feel like 80% to 90% of, really, I would say probably 90 to 95% of his runs aren't just up the middle like that, but this one didn't work out too well. Only gained him 2 yards. Not a disaster, but now it's going to be a 2nd down and 8. And again, something a bit weird is going to happen right here. What's going to end up happening is that, so you see that Deebo Samuel is running towards the bottom of the screen, and the Kansas City player who's in charge of covering him will also follow him. But what's interesting here is that it looks like the Kansas City player who I have circled, he's going to just kind of potentially get confused right here. He's a linebacker, so he should know that Samuel is not the guy who he's covering, but maybe he just thought it was a run or whatever. But they're both going to end up following Samuel, which is going to leave Kittle completely open. And watch George Kittle and watch how he gets completely uncovered. But Garoppolo just, again, doesn't notice this, and you can see the frustration on Kittle's face. He is very upset. I mean, he had a perfect opportunity to make this, he was open. He was wide open, but Garoppolo just missed him. It's just a frustrating situation. You kind of expected Garoppolo to be someone who could realize what was going on in these situations. He's not Manziel. He's definitely closer to Ryan, but he's not Matt Ryan either. He's somewhere in between. I think at this point, Shanahan quickly realized, okay, you know what? We don't have a perfect offense here. We hoped we did, but once again, this quest for a perfect offense, well, it hasn't been found just yet. We need a quarterback to be close to perfect, and maybe there just isn't such thing as a perfect quarterback. Maybe if he had Tom Brady, there would still be some problems, or Peyton Manning, Maybe there's always going to be a flaw, and basically you just have to accept the fact that there are going to be some flaws. But just because there is a flaw doesn't mean a quarterback still can't make great plays. Like what they're going to do here, it's going to be a cover one man play. It's relatively simple, but they have two receivers who are going to be running deep right here. So basically the idea is that the safety who's deep can only cover one of them. This now means that basically, he'll either run towards the middle or he'll run deep. There's several options, but what's going to happen here is that the Kansas City player does try to take away the route who's over the middle. Garoppolo notices this, throws it deep. He's able to make a very good throw towards the middle of the field. And just like that, they're able to pick up a huge gain and get inside the red zone. So just because Garoppolo had been making some mistakes, he's able to come through there. He's having a very, not necessarily an off night, just a hot and cold night. He made some bad plays, but he's making some good plays too. So they're having some success, even if not everything's working out perfectly. They would then, after that play, they're going to run play action. Juszczyk is going to fake as though he's running over the middle, and then he's going to run to the top of the screen. It works. Juszczyk fools them really well. He's able to make the catch and nearly get into the end zone for his second touchdown of the night, which would have been pretty awesome, having a fullback get multiple touchdowns in a Super Bowl. It didn't quite work out that way, but he was able to set up a situation where they can now get very close to the end zone and potentially score a touchdown here, and that's where this play would happen. Pretty simple, right? I mean, just a few one-on-one blocks, and, then Mostert just tries to run over and see if he can get in. Doesn't get too much more simple than this. This is just standard football. Even for Shanahan, it must be very boring. It's probably like watching grass grow, but at the end of the day, sometimes it's better to just be normal than to try to be creative. And watch how, even though the line doesn't even do a great job, Mostert does a great job of running in. He is able to get the touchdown, and they go up 2 scores. So, hey, this is what they weren't able to do in Super Bowl 51 late in the game. They weren't able to go up by that second score. And also, unlike Super Bowl 51, instead of just surrendering a bunch of points every drive, the defense is still holding. They got an interception. They now went up by 10, they stay up by 10 points. And now, really, Kansas City, they're running out of time. There's under 12 minutes at this point, and it's a 10-point game. Things are looking good for the 49ers. They're going to start things off with this play where they have their right tackle, and also they have a tight end double team Kansas City player, then move up to block a linebacker. Juszczyk then runs over to block the other defensive lineman. So, nothing too crazy. It's obviously going to be a run in that direction, and, it's blocked pretty well. The good burst there by Mostert, and they're able to pick up 5 yards. So, pretty good play, it's nothing spectacular, but that's kind of what you were hoping for, and now you can set up a third down and medium where, really, again, Shanahan, he has a couple options here. Yes, he could just keep running the ball. That's what he did against Green Bay. He just ran the ball constantly and ran out the clock, so maybe that's what he could do here. But he's going to say, you know what, if I'm going to lose this game, I'm going to lose this game by throwing the ball to my best player. And his best player is George Kittle. So what they're going to do is have Kittle run over the middle. Again, this is something they do all the time. And it can really work here when everyone's expecting a run. And watch how well it works. Despite the fact that Garoppolo actually makes a poor throw, Kittle's able to adjust and still make the catch. They get the first down, get near to 40. And at this point, it's like, hey, the play action is working. Yes, potentially the running game is working as well. But we know we have that now. We tried it here once. It worked out. This is good. Now let's not try that too much. It backfired with Atlanta. Let's not have it backfire again here. And so they're going to run the ball again. But I circled 49 right there. That's Daniel Sorensen. He had himself a great postseason, and he's going to make a really good play here. He's going to kind of do what would work against the Texans back when Shanahan was there, where he's going to just crash in, play super aggressive. If you're expecting a run and you think that maybe it could happen, don't worry about a play action. Just crash in and try to make a play, try to stop him, force him to throw the ball. We're okay with them throwing the football, and that's what he's going to do. He's going to run in, and he's able to help make that quick tackle so they don't gain too many yards on that play. Shanahan, again, has a decision to make. He could just keep running the ball, but it just didn't work, and the play action just did work. Again, it's a dilemma. It's definitely a situation where there's no easy options. You're now at 10 minutes and 20 seconds left, so really just getting a couple of minutes off of the clock, that's not going to do too much. I mean, you do want to get a drive going, maybe even get a touchdown and, make it a 3-score game, or just get a field goal and force them to have to score 2 touchdowns. Both would be effective. What's going to happen here is it's going to be play action. He's just going to say, you know what, let's just do what worked last time, play action, hit Deebo Samuel, who has been great all game, great all postseason. Let's trust that he can be great here in this moment. Garoppolo fakes the handoff, throws under pressure, and that results in a high throw off of Samuel's fingertips. Again, the pressure is getting to Garoppolo here, where it hasn't in previous times. You also see Deebo Samuel had an opportunity to make that catch. I mean, that was not an uncatchable ball, but Samuel was not able to make that grab. You could blame both of them, and I think you should. I mean, they both were not able to make that play, and it really had a disastrous outcome. Now it's a third down, and also the clock has been stopped. On third down, they can go back to zone coverage. They know it's not going to be a run here, at least, and even if it is, they probably just trust themselves that they could stop a run on a 3rd down and 10. That didn't work out too well for Green Bay, but that's something that they could potentially hope for. And really, those are all the routes that they want to throw to here. That these are the routes that could potentially get open. But after the ball snapped, nothing is open. Garoppolo is under pressure. He has to roll outside, and he doesn't even slide to make sure he stays in bounds. He kind of gets knocked out of bounds, which they wanted a flag. Didn't get it. You could argue that he should have slid. That would have killed an extra 15 seconds, but it's not going to matter too much. Those 15 seconds will not impact the game to much of a degree. But I also think that could kind of show where Garoppolo's head was at this moment. He's not doing those simple things. He's not sliding to just make sure that he kills more clock, even if it is just 15 seconds. He's also just slowly walking towards the end zone and allows himself to get pushed. He didn't run out of the end zone. He kind of doesn't know exactly what to do. He's kind of a bit timid right now. However, while he might be a bit timid, the Kansas City Chiefs offense was just waking up. They would march down the field with a big thanks from a 44-yard completion on a 3rd and 15 to end up getting a touchdown and making it just a 3-point game. So once again, a lead that looked really strong is now not looking strong at all. It's a 3-point game, 6 minutes left. Anything can happen. And for Shanahan, he's doing what most fans are probably pleading with him, just run the ball. And that's what he's going to do. 2 double teams over the middle. They're then both going to move up to block other players. So he's not just running the ball, but he's running it up the middle. This is not what he wants to do, although he's getting a bit creative with it. He kind of fakes it though it's going to be a run to the right. Then they go up the middle, and they pick up 5 yards. So, creative play call, and the creative play call worked. So Shanahan, he has 2 options here. He could decide to run the ball, but why would he do that? Where is the fun in doing that? He's instead going to pass it. If he's going to lose this game, he's going to lose this game throwing to his best player. It's going to be play action. Kittle's running a quick route, just trying to pick up the 1st down right here. He trusts Kittle in this moment. That's really what it comes down to, and for a good reason. The play works out. Kittle gets open. Every now and then you take a risk and it works out, and that's what happens here. Kittle is open. There is maybe a bit of pressure for Garoppolo, but not too much. He can easily make this throw. Except Chris Jones bats it down, and it results in an incompletion. Kittle was open. Kittle was easily open. This play worked out, but a batted ball at the line caused it to then not be able to work out the way they were hoping it would. So now it's a 3rd down and 5. Again, the clock is stopped. There's 5 minutes and 20 seconds left. There's a ton of time left at this point. A ton of time. I mean, the trying to kill this clock, you're going to have to get the ball into the red zone. So they need a long drive here. They really need the 1st down, and this is what's going to happen. It's a lot of routes that can work against man coverage. Really, Kansas City, they've been playing a decent amount, some zone here and there, but they've also been playing a lot of man, and they would really continue to play a lot of man further on. At the end of the day, if they're expecting a passing play, oftentimes man is the best thing to do, and so that's what they're going to do right here. There's several routes. Shanahan knows that man is probably coming. Pretty much all of these routes are good against man coverage, and so, after the ball is snapped, there's really 2 routes that Garoppolo likes. It's those 2 routes right there. One is George Kittle, easily open and getting ready to pass the 1st down marker. So, I think many would say that's where he should probably throw this ball to. The other is a relatively unknown player. It's Kendrick Bourne. Definitely not someone who is a household name by any means. He's definitely kind of just a player who's they're not relying on too much. But, Garoppolo, he's going to decide he's going to trust the role player instead of the superstar. And he ends up getting hit, so it didn't matter. He airmailed it over their heads. But also, he could have thrown the ball earlier if he was throwing it to Kittle, so it would have mattered. Just kind of a questionable decision by Garoppolo, and also, once again, while he gets hit, he is not able to make a particularly good throw. So while he hasn't been sacked too much, the pressure is certainly getting to him, and it was going from bad to worse. You talk about the horror movie from the game against the Patriots. Well, he's back, and he's slowly coming back yet again, and actually was relatively quickly. He marches over. The monster of this game is Patrick Mahomes, and he was able to give the team that is playing the Kyle Shanahan-led 49ers, the Kansas City Chiefs, a 4-point lead with just under 3 minutes to go. But hey, you know what? This is Shanahan's chance to redeem himself. Shanahan had an opportunity with about a minute left in Super Bowl 51 to go down the field and get a potential game-winning field goal. He failed. And while you do need a touchdown, you have an opportunity to get down the field. So hey, an opportunity for redemption. I mean, what else could you ask for? So if Shanahan's the kind of guy who likes to pass the ball when everyone thinks he should run the ball, well, why not just flip that on its head and run the ball when everyone thinks you're going to pass it? It looks like it's going to be a play action, with a slant route over the middle. That's kind of what you're expecting. But instead what they're going to do is they're going to have those 3 49ers players block those 3 Chiefs, and really every other Kansas City player is going to be expecting this to be like, okay, why are they even running play action here? We all know you're going to throw it. So when they run it, this allows them to pick up a really big gain on first down, and they get the first down just like that. So, hey, Shanahan, maybe sometimes he's better at just, coaching from behind than coaching with a lead. Maybe he's not the best at trying to kill some clock, but he's really good at coaching in a way where he can move the ball down the field. When he has to score a touchdown, he does a pretty good job of finding a way for them to score a touchdown. Kansas City, they would go to zone on this play, and so what they're going to do is just run a quick zone buster to the top of the screen like that. Those 2 players run like that. Basically, the idea is that the Kansas City player in charge of covering that section of the field, he has to choose either to cover deep or to cover shallow. And also, when you make the catch, you'll go out of bounds, which stops the clock. So, really a good situation either way here. And Garoppolo is able to hit George Kittle, who's shallow, but instead of just going out of bounds, he decides to run directly into Kansas City players and pick up even more yards because Kittle is pretty good at football. On this next play, it's something a little bit similar, but not exactly similar, but it's kind of the same idea. You have a couple of players sort of run like that, where one's going to run towards the middle, the other runs towards the outside. This can easily fool some Kansas City players who are in the area, and it's going to. Watch how, the player who's running towards the bottom of the screen, watch how open he gets right here. Jimmy Garoppolo has to make a throw kind of over the Kansas City player, but he is able to do it, and they're able to pick up the first down just like that. They're at midfield. This drive is going perfectly. This drive is going really well. They got the midfield very easily, and they didn't really have to sweat too much. So now they're just going to keep doing what they're doing. This is actually going to be a cover 2 man type play, but the one unique thing that Kansas City is going to do here is their safeties aren't too far deep, and they're basically going to say, you know what, if there's something over the middle that we feel like we can make a play on, that's what we're going to do. And while there are 2 routes over the middle, Kansas City is a little bit prepared for those. However, I personally feel like if this is what they're going to do, they need to be further closer to the middle because these routes can definitely get open and can even go for a potential first down. So, the plays develops and they are open, but again, a tipped pass right there. I have to imagine as an offensive coordinator or a head coach who calls the plays, that has to be the most frustrating thing. I mean, you call the correct play, you have a player open who can potentially get a first down and, get you inside the 40, and it just doesn't work out due to a batted ball. And this is a couple times now that this has happened. So real frustration from Shanahan, I'm sure, but he's also got to say, well, hey, at least I know what I'm doing is working. Let's just do something very similar. They're going to have another player run over the middle. He's going to basically just try and get open before the 2 players who are deep. This is Something that makes sense. This is basically what worked last time, so why not have it work again? But this time, Kansas City has a feeling they know what's coming. So, again, remember how I said they're willing to make a break on it if they feel like they have an opportunity to. And watch how this almost results in a game-sealing interception. This was super close to that happening, and that had to scare Shanahan greatly, I would think. So, okay, what do you do now? This is a cover 2-man type play, kind of similar to a cover 2 buzz. It's sort of, or not a cover 2 buzz, just a buzz in general. They're playing sort of shallow. There are quote unquote 2 safeties, but they're really taking over the middle of the field. Well, what do you do here? You bob and weave. I mean, think about it. Remember what they did earlier on in that Super Bowl 51 matchup when they had an opportunity to make it a 3-score game and kind of slam the door shut, where they kept double teaming Julio Jones. So instead of having Jones run deep, they had him run over the middle, and then they had Taylor Gabriel run deep. He was wide open, but just pressure came too quickly, so they weren't able to make the play. Well, hey, now you have the exact same situation, almost. I mean, it's a little modified, but, they're taking away the middle of the field. So if they're taking away the middle of the field, well, why not run deep? Emmanuel Sanders is going to run deep right here. And, you notice one of the routes I really haven't talked too much about with Shanahan and really this entire series has been a go route. That's kind of been the least used weapon in his arsenal, but it's also the most powerful. I mean, a go route, that gets you usually a ton of yards, often a touchdown, and it can get you a touchdown here. If everyone's expecting something over the middle, when you run deep, you could potentially get wide open. This is a brilliant idea by Shanahan. This is him, once again, realizing the situation, calling the absolute perfect call, and he totally redeems himself and gets the call that wins the San Francisco 49ers the Super Bowl. There's a parable called The Road to Baghdad. It's basically about, there's this dad and his son who live together. I don't know why so many parables and fables are all about a son and a dad, but regardless, that's what happens in this one. And the son meets death. He sees death. He's in the field somewhere, and he sees death. So he gets scared, is frightened, and bolts back into the house, tells his dad what he saw. His dad is obviously very afraid. He wants to make sure that his son doesn't end up getting killed by death. So he says, you know what, here, let's get you some money. Let's get you on the road to Baghdad. We'll get you to go over there so that way you can escape death. It makes some sense. That's what he does. He gets his son on the way, and his dad, who is now very frightened, he goes out in the fields and searches for death, and he finds death. So him and Death, he goes to him and says, what are you doing? Are you trying to get my son to die? Why are you doing this? And Death sort of says, oh, I am terribly sorry. I was just scouting things out beforehand. I'm not even supposed to be here right now. I'm supposed to meet your son on the road to Baghdad. Basically, it's a little corny, but the idea is essentially that if you sometimes do the right thing, you make the correct decision. The dad doing the right thing. He gave his son money to go to Baghdad, where there's a much less chance of him dying. But just in this instance, it turns out that that's actually the worst thing he could have possibly done. Shanahan made the right call. He made a perfect call. This is the call that should have won them the Super Bowl, but instead, it sent them on the road to Baghdad. There would be one more opportunity. Now, again, you have to get the first down here. It's 4th down and 10. So it's man coverage, and, what's going to happen is that's really the route that Garoppolo wants to hit. This kind of reminds me of the Browns situation, where you have to throw it deep, and pressure can come quickly, and you have to just hope that a developing play can work out in time. That's the route Garoppolo wants to hit, but it's just not going to get open in time. The pressure comes, Garoppolo gets sacked. He tries to just throw it up, but he was already ruled down. And that was the Super Bowl. I mean, that was it. That was their opportunity. Shanahan made the right call. He had the call that put them in position to win it, and it didn't work out that way. There's one more play I'll break down just for the fun of it, I suppose. I think this is interesting because this is basically the situation Kyle Shanahan wanted to avoid being on the plus side of, where, it's a 2-score game, there's under 2 minutes left, and you have only 2 timeouts, but, you need 2 scores, and you need an onside kick. This is what he was trying to avoid the Patriots from getting in Super Bowl 51, but this one wouldn't work out either. It's a cover 3 zone. He has a receiver running, actually the route you want to run against the cover 3 zone, But when Garoppolo takes a step back and throws it over the middle, there's just a great defensive play which results in an interception. And I think that's kind of just the most poetic way to end this series. That's kind of the play I wanted to show, because I feel like that's a poetic end to that season where, it was a great play call and it wasn't even a bad throw. It was just a good defensive play. Sometimes you do everything right and still lose. And that's kind of been the story in a lot of ways with Shanahan. Not saying he's done everything right, but he's certainly done enough right to have won a Super Bowl or two. But sometimes things don't work out that way. It's football, and not everything works out the way it's supposed to. So what is the story of Kyle Shanahan? Well, for one thing, it's not over yet, but it kind of feels like it is. It feels like a complete story. I mean, you could argue that this is the story of a guy who is great but struggles in the big moments. You also could argue that this is the guy who is perfect and just got unlucky. I think reality is it's a third option. He's someone who's great, but he also is someone who has made mistakes. However, he is an amazing play caller. He's not good, he's great. He is one of the best play callers we have ever seen, and the small mistakes he has made have been heavily outweighed by the great play calls he's had throughout it. Kyle Shanahan is a fantastic play caller, and he's probably the best offensive play caller of our time. But that's just my opinion. I'd like to know what you guys think, and of course, as always, thanks for watching.